what is up, everyone?
Welcome back to Mile Higher Podcast, episode 53 on Ted Bundy.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys are ready for this guy. If you don't know who this guy is.
Well, I think a lot of people do. And I think right now, a lot of people just learned about him because of this Netflix series that came out.
Right. That's true. A lot of people are probably watching it on Netflix now.
It's a hot topic, and there's a new movie coming out about him with Zac Efron playing Ted Bundy.
Yeah, it's called like Shockingly Evil or something vile.
Like yeah, it'll be interesting. I want to see it.
Yeah. Because this guy is literally like probably the worst serial killer in American history, I would say. The most notorious, obviously there's been other bad ones like John Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer and Charles Manson stuff,
and H.H. Holmes is probably worse than all of them.
But I don't know, man. This guy was a complete savage, like in every sense of the term.
H.H. Holmes had a whole torture castle. I think he was the worst.
Was he in the U.S.?
Yep.
Oh, for some reason I kept thinking he was in London or something. I don't know why.
No, they think that he could possibly have gone to London and been Jack the Ripper as well, which we should do a podcast on that.
That's right.
But H.H. Holmes was a gruesome motherfucker.
He was in his death hotel.
He was probably the worst. But Ted Bundy, literally, I'd say he's definitely one of the worst. He's horrifying. He is like next level evil.
And I think the big reason for that is because he is so smart and cunning and devious that it just makes him even more dangerous and really interesting to look at just from a, investigative standpoint, because he's just such a weird creature.
In a psychology standpoint, like he's just so odd. This year we watched, probably a lot of you guys watched Shane Dawson's documentary on, or series on sociopaths. Yeah. He's like that, but
to a T, plus psychopath, plus
he's just insane.
Probably mentally ill.
But he's very unique, and there's so much to talk about. So before we get into that,
we're gonna talk about his life, and obviously we watched the Conversations with the Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes, the Netflix documentary that's out there that some of you guys have seen as well, and we're just blown away by it. So I'm sure you guys will find today's episode really interesting, probably disturbing a bit because it is so gruesome and violent, but we will try to keep it down a bit. But let's get into today's stories. The first story I've got for you is coming out of Antarctica, because NASA scientists were doing a type of exploratory mission down there where they like scan the ice with lasers to kind of check and see, how thick it is, how much melting is happening. And what they discovered is pretty startling. Essentially, they found a cavity that's 2/3 the size of Manhattan, which is large enough to contain about 14 billion tons of ice before it melted. So all that ice was there, and now it's melted.
Oh my God.
That's a lot of ice.
That's so
that
scary.
Melted. So they're down there. The size of
Manhattan?
Yeah. That's huge.
That's really, really big.
And I mean, that's going to have an effect on sea levels. So scientists are kind of freaking out a little bit because the explosive rate at which the ice in Antarctica is melting is unlike anything we've ever seen, and it continues to pick up every year.
Oh, that's so freaky.
Rapidly melting.
It's so scary that it seems to not even be an issue. Like, was it talked about last night? I didn't watch the State of the Union, but was it even mentioned?
I don't think climate change was mentioned at all.
That's so disappointing.
Which is just stupid, because
everyone should be talking about that.
I mean, the climate is changing. It's getting warmer. Like today, I just saw an article come out that said last year was like the warmest year on record or something, or this year or something like that. Like literally the earth is heating up year after year after year, and the ice is just going to continue melting, which is going to cause sea levels to rise and a bunch of other chain reaction events.
It makes me like afraid to have kids.
Well, it definitely makes you think about the future of humanity if we don't fucking figure out a solution. Or figure out some way to negate this damage that we're doing to the planet. But at the same time, it's like, is this part of the cycle? Like, even if we did try to reduce emissions, would it be enough to prevent the earth from warming?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole debate about that, but I don't know.
Are we too far along? Have we fucked it up too much already? I think is the question too.
I don't know.
Because I don't think this just naturally happened. Maybe it does naturally happen, but we clearly sped up the process a ton. Like maybe over time, this is supposed to happen.
Well, yeah, and I guess you can look at all the ozone layer and how there's so many holes in it, and we've damaged that, and we're killing all of our oxygen, our trees, and everything that help clean the atmosphere. So I think we're definitely attributing to it, but sometimes I think maybe there's, some type of cycle of the planet where it kind of has to reset itself, which is absolutely terrifying to think about, especially
why would
that
we want to
happening in our
speed
lifetime.
that up? Because we are speeding it up.
I know.
So at the end of the day, whether people can make that argument all day, but why would we want to speed it up? Maybe that's 1,000-year process and we're making it 100-year process.
Yeah.
Why would we want to do that? Are people not worried about their future kids and their grandkids?
I just don't think people are really thinking about it too much because right now you don't see an immediate impact on people's daily lives. And I think until it starts doing that, even though a lot of people do see the effects of it who live by the coast, especially.
Yeah, well, those coastal cities are going to be really hurting, especially places like Miami, Venice.
Yeah.
We're talking about.
Yeah. All that's going to be underwater because this glacier, which is called the Thwaites Glacier, is approximately the size of Florida. And it's already behind about 4% of global sea rise. And the disappearance of the ice mass would cause sea levels to rise by about 2 feet as well, by making surrounding glaciers more likely to melt rapidly, which could cause an 8-foot rise in sea level. Just an 8-foot rise in sea level would be enough to probably affect a lot of cities at sea level. 8 feet of water that is there permanently. What do you do? I
don't know.
It's gonna have to. I don't know. It's gonna be really interesting to see how things shake out. But
not interesting, horrifying.
Yeah. God. Yeah. Today's episode is just full of horrifying news, actually. But
climate stuff really scares me so much.
It does. And I don't know what to do about it. But the other story that I had for you guys today is one that's kind of been making the rounds and has kind of popped into mainstream media as well. And that is a Harvard astronomy professor, Avi Loeb, who's literally one of the top astronomers in the world. He's an Ivy League professor. He's I think the head of the department there, at Harvard. So he basically released like an academic paper about the giant space rock or object that was dubbed Oumuamua, I think is how you pronounce it. And it was first discovered by Hawaiian astronomers in 2017 because it was literally this interstellar object that came flying from another star system outside of our solar system into our solar system and is now on its way around Jupiter. And this Harvard astronomer basically came to the conclusion that this is some type of extraterrestrial spacecraft, or, it's some piece of it, like a light sail, some type of equipment that's used by extraterrestrials to get around space.
Wow.
So it's shaken up. Yeah, it's really shaken up things.
I knew about this morning that this news had broke into the mainstream because I watch The View sometimes. Well, I watch it every day, not gonna lie. I've been watching it for like 6 years, so it's like a tradition thing for me. But the mainstream media has caught wind of the UFOs today. They were talking about it in the most, I guess, woke way I've ever heard.
Very open.
It was very open. They were all like, "Yep, there's probably aliens."
And that's the thing is, I think it's kind of becoming a more universally accepted idea that aliens are probably already visiting us, and especially with all of the UFO stuff that's been coming out, I think a lot more people are like really wrapping their heads around the likelihood that we are being contacted by aliens in some way, shape, or form, or they're cruising around above us in space. So
Megan McCain brought up the Phoenix Lights today as well. It was pretty cool. They showed a video of it.
She saw them, which is really interesting.
I don't know if she saw them or if she just like remembers it because she lived there.
Yeah. But it was really interesting to see them talking about it. But I guess we'll have to wait and see if this thing comes back. But it's out flying past Jupiter right now, and I don't know where it's headed. But this astronomy professor from Harvard thinks it's some type of extraterrestrial craft or piece of a craft. So it's really interesting because there's a lot of scientists and astronomers that just straight up are like, there's no way possible that thing was a spacecraft or aliens or anything like that. So can you go? later. But let's get right into Ted Bundy. So first, before we start, I want to thank our first sponsor, Robinhood. Robinhood is an investing app that lets you buy and sell stocks, ETFs, options, and cryptos, all commission free, while other brokerages charge up to $10 every trade. Robinhood doesn't charge any commission fees, so you can trade stocks and keep all your profits. Plus, there is no account minimum deposit needed to get started, so you can start investing at any level. The simple, intuitive design of Robinhood makes investing easy for newcomers and experts alike. View easy-to-understand charts and market data and place a trade in just 4 taps on your smartphone. You can also view stock collections such as 100 most popular. With Robinhood, you can learn how to invest in the market as you build your portfolio. Discover new stocks, track your favorite companies, and get custom notifications for price movements so you never miss the right moment to invest. Robinhood is giving listeners of Mile Higher Podcast a free stock like Apple, Ford, or Sprint to help you build your portfolio. Sign up at milehigher.robinhood.com. But let's get into the notorious Ted Bundy.
All right.
Oh, man. So the Ted Bundy is just a different type of animal, as you will see. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about his early life, where he came from. It's always interesting to see where serial killers come from, and you start seeing patterns in serial killers' upbringings. But it's interesting because Ted Bundy did have a fairly, as far as what we know, a fairly normal childhood. That's what he tells us too. But anyway, so Ted Bundy was born Theodore Robert Cowell and born on November 24th, 1946 in Burlington, Vermont. Ted's mom was Eleanor Cowell, who went by her middle name Louise. His father's identity was never determined with any degree of certainty, which is interesting. His birth certificate assigned the father to a salesman and Air Force veteran named Lloyd Marshall. But Louise later claimed that she had been seduced by a sailor whose name may have been Jack Worthington. Years later, investigators would find no record of anyone by that name in the Navy or Merchant Marine archives. Some family members expressed suspicions that Bundy might have been fathered by Louise's own violent, abusive father, Samuel Cowell. But no evidence has ever been cited to support or refute this. Yeah, that's frightening too.
Oh, that's freaky. So could have been some incest involved there.
So he's basically like a bastard child, like born out of wedlock, and just like kind of it seems like a mistake, right? Like kind of.
Do people still use that term, bastard
child?
Yeah,
I hear that all the time. I don't know. I
feel like the only time I've heard that was like Game of Thrones. Like, I don't think people refer to people like that anymore.
But you know he is a bastard child, so you know.
For him, we can call him that.
For fucking Ted Bundy, I'm going to call him a bastard.
He was a mistake.
A big mistake.
A major mistake.
A lot of people still be alive if you never was born.
A major fucking mistake.
Yeah. But Ted growing up was described as the best son in the world and a normal, active boy.
It's so bizarre.
It is. And he wanted to be an attorney or politician growing up. Very smart, witty kid. I think from a young age, he was always just like really clearly intelligent, both academically, but seems like socially he had some issues there. Like, he was kind of the odd man out growing up.
It was just like something was a little off about him.
Yeah.
It seemed like, even from when they were talking about him when he was younger. He didn't have tons of friends. He's described as being like, people know him, I think, because compared to other serial killers, he's decent looking. I mean, people say that Zac Efron looks a lot like him, and I'm kind of like,
no.
Maybe with like a fuck ton of makeup, but like he's ugly. I don't understand this whole like Ted Bundy so attractive thing. Like, yeah, maybe compared to John Wayne Gacy, he's like a little better looking, but like,
yeah,
he's not. Even if I didn't know what I know about him, he is not like good looking to me. He like freaks me out. So that whole situation is weird anyway.
Yeah, no, I don't understand that. And with the new Netflix documentary, there's like articles like women are freaking out about how attractive Ted Bundy is.
Yeah, there's been tons of controversy about it, and a lot of controversy over them casting Zac Efron because people think it's like making light of it.
I think it's kind of fucked up, honestly.
Do you?
I think it's kind of fucked up that, you know, I'm all for like retelling history, but at the same time, I think this is exactly what Ted Bundy would want.
Yeah,
is for us to
he'd be
create
like
a
so
movie
happy
about him. He'd be he'd be at the premiere if he was alive. He'd be like thrilled.
Yep, he would.
So for the first 3 years of his life, Ted lived in the Philadelphia home of his maternal grandparents, Samuel and Eleanor Cowell, who raised him as their son to avoid the social stigma that accompanied birth outside of wedlock. So it's like, hide him away. But, well, basically, I don't think his mom even wanted him initially. And so she was about to like give him up for like adoption or like orphan him in a way. And his grandparents stepped in and took him in.
Mm-hmm.
So family, friends, and even young Ted were told that his grandparents were his parents and that his mother was his older sister. Not a good way to start out.
Yeah, no.
It's going to set him up for some trauma later. But anyway, he eventually discovered the truth, of course. Ted had a lifelong resentment toward his mother for never talking to him about his real father and for leaving him to discover who his true parents were on his own instead of telling him. Apparently, when Ted's mom gave birth to him, she had him in a home for unwed mothers. It's so weird that they used to have places like that.
I was going to say that's bizarre. Unwed mothers. Single mom, you mean?
No, because like having a child out of wedlock was such like so frowned upon back then.
No, I know, but today.
Oh, yeah. However, she didn't intend to keep Ted, and after she gave birth, she left him there and went home. However, her father insisted that she needed to go back and get him and bring him home. In some interviews, Ted spoke warmly of his grandparents and said that he identified with, respected, and clung to his grandfather. In 1987, however, he and other families said that his grandfather, Samuel, was a bully and a bigot who hated blacks, Italians, Catholics, and Jews.
Wow.
So, some hate there. Ted's grandfather also beat his wife and the family dog and swung neighborhood cats by their tails.
Oh my gosh.
I was going to say, like, I with serial killers, I feel like it starts really, really young, like whether it's the abuse or the abuse of animals or, you know, just things like that.
Well, it says his grandfather did that.
Yeah.
So he saw his grandfather doing it. So maybe his grandfather was the real root of so much of this.
I mean, there's probably a lot we don't even know about things that happened to him or things he might have forgotten about or
or blocked out.
Or blocked out.
Yeah, who really knows?
But Ted once threw Luisa's younger sister, Julia, down a flight of stairs for oversleeping. Or Ted's grandfather did, I'm sorry. He also apparently sometimes spoke aloud to unseen presences, and at least once he flew into a violent rage when the question of who Ted's parents were. Ted described his grandmother as a timid and obedient woman who periodically underwent electroconvulsive therapy for depression. So it seems to me like there's already some clear depression that probably runs in the family because, right, depression is a genetic disease. I think like you
yes.
Sometimes there's genetic links.
Run in the family, yes. God, I cannot imagine
therapy.
Ugh, that's freaky. Normally they'd like put something in your mouth and then shock you. Can you imagine going through that?
What the hell do they think that was doing? Like,
oh my gosh, I think going to like the dentist is bad. Imagine doing that. Ugh.
Seriously, they'll do freaky. That, but they won't give you like, you know, some ecstasy or acid to fix that problem.
They weren't going to give people that back then.
They'd rather shock you like the electric chair.
Or today or ever.
No.
Why would you give someone that though when they're like, if they're having like...
No, I'm just saying that there's studies that's showing that
for depression,
psilocybin, things like that actually can be a cure for depression is what I'm saying.
Yes, psilocybin
instead
for sure.
of electroconvulsive therapy. Like, the fuck? But Ted occasionally exhibited disturbing behavior even at an early age. Julia recalled awakening one day from a nap to find herself surrounded by knives with her 3-year-old nephew Ted standing by the bed smiling.
Dude, he was born like this, I'm telling you.
Born killer.
I don't know. Like, it's so interesting. We've talked about like, you know, serial killers. Is it something you're born with? Can you be born evil? We have that conversation a lot. And I think Ted Bundy's such an interesting example because, I mean, he had a little trauma in his life for sure. It was like a little unstable and he didn't know who his real dad was. And his grandpa swung cats around by their fucking tails, you know, but like, he didn't have any like major thing happen that would cause you to then go be a serial killer. And so I truly believe that Ted Bundy was born like that. Like something is wrong in his brain. There's maybe
a killer gene or something, or like
I don't know if it's a gene. I think maybe it's just like It could be
the way his brain chemistry was or something.
Yeah, something
he
like
was
that.
born with like a chemical imbalance that doesn't allow him to, I don't know, care for anything.
Yeah, something like that. Or just like the need to kill. I don't know. I think some people are born with it because, think about it. A lot of people go through traumatic events, like way worse than some of what these serial killers go through. And so, yes, I think that going through traumatic things such as like, being abused as a child, that kind of stuff definitely contributes to being a serial killer. But at the same time, I think a lot of that you're just born with. And I think that maybe it doesn't help you to suppress it if you have a lot of anger, but maybe there are people out there who have good lives but have that same feeling, but because they have good supportive families and stuff, they're able to like conceal it or
overcome
hide,
it,
overcome it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's really interesting. I'm surprised there's not more people researching serial killers and like, once they're gone, dissecting their brains and trying to figure out what's actually, if there is some type of chemical
thing. Was his
thing.
brain ever dissected?
I think they said that they he was looked at by a psychologist and they said his brain was different, but I don't know what the exact details were on that. Yeah. I don't think they ever dissected his brain or anything or actually figured out what it was. But anyway, in 1950, Louise changed her surname from Cal to Nelson, and after being encouraged by multiple family members, she left Philadelphia with her son to live with cousins Alan and Jane Scott in Tacoma, Washington. In 1951, Louise met Johnny Bundy, a hospital cook, at an adult singles night at Tacoma's First Methodist Church. They married later that year, and John Bundy formally adopted Ted. Johnny and Louise conceived 4 children of their own, and although Johnny tried to include his adoptive son in camping trips and other family activities, Ted remained distant. So a very transient childhood, bouncing around between his mom and his grandparents, and then his mom brought in this new man, Johnny, which is where he gets his last name, Bundy. And I think he really was kind of the odd man out. And I think there was probably something special in a disturbing sense about him, and the fact that he felt so alone and isolated and didn't really have the friends that he said he did, and probably was alone a lot and in his head a lot, had no way to work through the feelings he was having,
definitely
led to the destruction later, because Ted describes his childhood very differently than it really was. Ted said that his childhood was really great, and he always had a ton of friends to play with and do activities with.
He talks about his whole life like it was really great. That's why we really have no idea, like, did he get abused at all? Like, think about it. If the grandfather beat his own wife, it's possible he did beat him as a kid. But he didn't really talk about anything negative that happened to him. He wanted maybe he thought it would make him seem more innocent or more believable to be innocent if he didn't have all this fucked up things happen to him.
Well, that's the thing, is we don't know if he's lying or not. We don't know if he's concocting his story of his life or if it's really
But we know
happened.
that a lot of it is a lie.
Right.
Because, he made it sound like he was really, really popular. He was really smart. He was like top of the class, an athlete, and he was like none of that shit.
Yeah, he described himself as one of the boys.
Yeah.
But he totally wasn't. He was like always the odd dude out.
And he had a mad unibrow, right? Did you notice that?
Yeah.
It was like straight across.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh,
his yearbook
God.
photo.
God. But Sandy Holt, Ted's childhood friend, describes John Bundy as being a really great dad to him. Johnny and Ted's mom were really involved with their children. Their family were churchgoers every Sunday. They were all involved in Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, etc. However, she also says that Ted was just different. For a long time growing up, he had a bad speech impediment and would get made fun of often. She said that he just didn't fit in. For example, at Boy Scouts, Ted was the one who was always struggling to learn how to tie the ropes right, shoot the gun right. He also had a temper and apparently liked to scare and prank people. Yeah, when I started hearing that, I'm like, so it's building and building. He's feeding off this negativity that he's receiving.
Yeah, he was being bullied.
He was totally being bullied.
That's why bullying is seriously such
an issue.
But
he probably was like pretty weird. Like, he was probably a weird kid. And I don't know, maybe he wasn't looking, maybe he didn't really want acceptance though. Because, he is this weird special individual in the sense that he feeds off of all of that. Feeds off his anger. In high school, he wanted to do something. He wanted to be something that he wasn't. He wanted to prove to everyone that he was capable of succeeding. Ted said that some people did see him as shy or introverted because he didn't want to go to school dances and wasn't into going out drinking, but that he wasn't an outcast in any way.
The way he says that in a documentary too, he's like, wasn't an outcast in any way.
Oh yeah, he's so full of himself and
he
hero
thinks he's
complex.
amazing.
Yeah, he does.
And he acts like he's famous. Like he starts like acting like he's like a celebrity. Like he's like looks around at people like they're his fans.
Yeah, he does.
Did you notice that in the documentary?
He definitely has this condescending
when he's being interviewed and stuff.
Nature.
Like, you're blessed to be listening to me right now or to see me. Like when he's walking in public, he would like
it's
wave
literally
and
like
smile.
he thought he was Jesus his whole life or something.
He had
like
a major reminds me of Charles Manson's mentality.
Yeah. Which the fact that between killers, it's interesting. But in 1966, Ted graduated high school and started attending the University of Washington, where he got an undergraduate degree in psychology, funny enough. Of course he goes and gets a psychology degree, probably because knowing that it'll help him understand people better and, who knows what else. But while he was there, he met a woman named Diane Marjorie Jean Edwards.
Or maybe he wanted to understand his own brain. He knew he was fucked up and he wanted to know why.
Or or he wanted to try to diagnose himself. Is that psychology? Does that even give you the ability to diagnose things? I don't know. I don't know much about psychology.
No, but he can, he would know about it. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. But her and Ted hit it off. And for the first time, Ted had a girlfriend. After college, he decided he wanted to enter politics and was described as a clean-cut Richard Nixon type of conservative. Ted said that he was really against the tactics used on the anti-war movement that had been going on, which was like trashing the public places and people just acting out of control. So Ted started volunteering to come to work on the campaign to get the governor of Seattle at the time reelected. And one of the reasons that Ted was into politics was because a large part of politics is how your image looks, which is what Ted was all about, his image.
Oh, yeah.
And he always...
And you can bullshit. Politicians are full of shit. And I think he was like, oh.
You can trick people. Yeah. You can fool people. You can...
It's all about what you present to them.
Is what people receive you as. So he really liked that. And it gave, made him well liked because he was kind of, getting into a social situation that he wasn't ever in before and getting good feedback from it. So people wanted to trust Ted. In the 1970s, the idea of a serial murder was a new thing to society. People had never heard of someone just going on a killing spree. The term serial killer didn't even exist, which is interesting. All the way up to the 1970s, nobody had figured out that, somebody could be a serial killer. Or maybe they just never were able to put a name to it. But
yeah, maybe they didn't realize that there would be someone out there who kills for fun,
Yeah, because at the time, I think the only other person was Charles Manson, right? In 1971, Charles Manson.
Yeah.
So he was like kind of the first serial killer with Bundy.
Yeah.
But
I can't believe it was until then that they waited to say serial killer.
Yeah.
That's so weird. 1971. Wow.
Well, I think it's also because serial killers oftentimes, well, not all the time, but oftentimes move locations between states, and just the sharing of information was so minimal compared to now.
But still, they knew of serial killers. Yeah. They knew of Jack the Ripper. They knew of H.H. Holmes. Like there were serial killers.
Yeah,
Madame
that's
Lalaurie.
Interesting. They didn't really know that. Yeah,
like there was clearly people that killed for fun. I don't know. That's bizarre. That's weird.
But the 1970s was when the disappearances started. In April of 1974, a young woman disappeared in Washington. Her name was Linda Ann Healy, and she was a 21-year-old student at the University of Washington. Guess who else goes to the University of Washington? Ted Bundy. She disappeared from her apartment that she lived in with 5 other students. Linda was a local weather reporter for a radio station. Every morning she would come on the radio to talk about the weather, what the weather was going to be like. According to her roommate, her alarm went off at around 5:30 a.m., but Linda wasn't in her room and she didn't show up for work. She was gone, which was very unusual for her to not show up for work. She's like a very reliable and responsible young woman, and it wasn't like her to just disappear and not tell anybody where the hell she was going. One of her roommates said that the night Linda went missing, she was in her room studying when Linda came into her room at about 11:30 p.m. She said they talked for a little and that she seemed to be in a pretty good mood. And then at around 12 a.m., she said that she was going to bed. So when Linda didn't show up the next day, the newspapers proceeded to announce to the public that she was missing. So she was last seen around midnight that night, and then she just disappeared out of her room without a trace, really.
So scary.
Very scary. So at this point, there was a crime scene search. The police got involved, and during the search, they found a substantial amount of blood under her pillow on her sheets. And the crazy thing was Linda's bed was perfectly made, so you didn't notice anything was wrong until you pulled back the covers.
Oh, weird.
So this is thought to be Ted Bundy's first victim, which I've also heard things that said that there's, I don't know if it's a rumor or if somehow he alluded to this, but it's possible Ted Bundy's first killing was done at a really young age, killed an 8-year-old girl, I believe.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I don't know if I don't know if that's fact or it's just a rumor or something, but his first victim was supposedly killed when he was like really young, like 13 or something. He killed a little girl or something.
So that's interesting. Weird.
So, but officially, Healy was Ted's first victim.
And he had talked about how he was like dating a girl that summer, right? And she broke up with him.
Yes.
So like right before this happened, he was like dating this girl. He was really, really into her, and she kind of like ditched him, and he really couldn't handle the rejection. And he said that whole summer was a blur for him, and that's when he started killing people. So he kind of channeled his rage against her because he loved her and he didn't want to harm her on like random other women. You know, but it's clearly something that had been inside him for a long time, but was invoked by the breakup.
Yeah, yeah. That's an extreme reaction to a breakup.
Yeah, well, it's not just a breakup; it's like rejection. It's the feeling of rejection that could trigger someone like that.
Yeah, God. But in June 1974, only 2 months after Linda goes missing, another woman went missing. She also lived in the University of Washington area close to where Linda lived. Her name was Jorgen Hawkins, and she was last seen on a Monday night after she was visiting a frat house and was returning home, which was about a half a block away down an alley. Just like Linda, she was not the person to just take off and not tell people where she was. So because 2 women from the same college had gone missing within 2 months of each other, people in the area started getting really freaked out. There were still no hints as to where they went or who took them. Literally, there was no evidence that they could find to help them figure out who could have done it. And that was the big problem back in the 70s is there's no DNA, there's no like technology really. It's very old school crime scene forensics, like looking for fibers, hair, blood, but they can't do DNA testing, which probably would have caught him way earlier than they did. But yeah, so they're trying to figure out who it is. Law enforcement is telling everybody to stay out of the alleyways at night. People are scared. People are actually locking their doors because like back then, nobody locked shit up, which is so weird to me. Like they never locked their houses. The sorority house was probably open because whoever took these girls, you know, went into the sorority house to get the first one.
So I was in a sorority in college and I never lived in the sorority house, but we had people break in more than once to the house, like over time. There was one while I was there and then there was another one before that, but someone had broken in. So there was like a creepy dude that would like hang out around the back of our house.
Yeah,
so we finally started.
That was like a sketchy area too.
Yeah. Yeah. We had to make a rule my freshman year. That was the year it happened that you have to lock the back door because before it was just like a free for all. But yeah, there was another group of girls that I knew that lived in a house that had someone break in while they were in it.
Really?
Yeah, like college houses because they're normally not that safe.
That. Yeah, I remember that. I forget which sorority it was, but that's fucking frightening.
No, it was just a house. It was just like someone's house. Yeah.
I thought one of the other sorority houses got broken.
Probably, honestly. But yeah, it's kind of creepy.
Yeah, and back then it was super easy to break in because literally the doors were open.
Yeah.
People would leave the keys in the ignition of their cars.
Dude, my mom is from this generation. She didn't lock shit when I was a kid. Like both my parents, my dad would check it more often, but my mom would leave our car in the driveway with the car door open, keys in the ignition.
People just didn't have the same fears that we do today.
No.
They just never even thought about that
somebody would never
would do
that. I can't imagine going to bed without like locking all our shit.
Oh, seriously.
And, like, setting the alarm.
Especially now. I'm like paranoid. I'm like locking everything I can. Yeah. Blinds down, alarm set.
Yeah, I definitely could not sleep if I knew a door was unlocked.
Yeah, but after Ted graduated from the University of Washington, he decided that he wanted to go to law school. So he started applying to a number of them. However, his test scores were not very good. And so the bigger law programs wouldn't accept him. So he was forced to attend a night school, and something that he really didn't want to do.
He was ashamed by it. He
was
depressed.
Completely humiliated by it. Yeah. I mean, huge ego, obviously. And to not get the test scores, to like follow your colleagues to like, the big school in that area, he had to go a different route, which was kind of embarrassing for him. Because it ended.
Oh, so I'm sorry. He was still dating Diane at this point, though, when he moved there. This is when their relationship fell apart. I got that wrong. So he killed someone before that.
Yes, during their relationship. Two went missing. Yeah.
Okay, right.
Yeah, Ted's in a relationship with Diane.
Okay.
When these two girls go missing. So because he didn't get in the school that he wanted, his relationship with Diane started falling apart. He says that during those months in the summer of 1974, Diane started to become more and more distant, which made him more and more paranoid. He says that he doesn't remember what happened or what he did during that summer. Yeah, he did say that. Except the fact that he wanted to get some sort of revenge on Diane. In addition to law school, Ted also had a brief job working for the Seattle Crime Commission. Aha. Mm-hmm. Another serial killer that's somehow involved with law enforcement to try to like cover their back and provide intel, possibly. Which I think that was just a planned move on his part, just to help bring legitimacy to him and his story about going to law school and stuff.
Yeah.
Help cover his tracks. Ted also, the job gave him access to a lot of statistics on crimes. He got a firsthand look at the police did when someone went missing. So he knew exactly what police would look for in a crime scene. Much like other serial killers, they knew exactly what to hide, how to throw the police off their trail, fake evidence, things like that. So he was already in tune with all of that. Ted was also able to see how there was a large lack of communication and organization between one jurisdiction and another jurisdiction. Which could this have been the reason why Ted took women from different areas? Was it because he knew that it would be harder for law enforcement to figure it out?
Yes, and I feel like any smart serial killer does this. It's way harder because of the lack of communication between police departments back then.
And I mean, even today, it's not flawless today.
You still confuse them.
I mean, it's way better. We have internet, email, and,
I feel like as a serial killer, the stupidest thing you could do is like have a specific killing style and always do the same thing and leave a mark thingy and like identify yourself. It's so like some of them get so like egotistical with it. I don't know. It's really creepy to think about though, that if these are the serial killers that we've caught, imagine the ones that have done it so sneaky that they have fooled police.
You can't detect them.
Yeah. Or like they've made people look like it was an accident and it wasn't. And it really scares me thinking about the serial killers that we haven't caught, because they're probably worse than any of the ones we have caught, and they're probably smarter.
Yeah, and they could be going on for years and years and years.
Yeah, I know.
Which is just terrifying.
Freaky.
So at this point in time, there were other girls that were starting to disappear. Between January and June of 1974, 4 other women besides Linda and Jorgen had disappeared around the same time.
Jorgen?
Yeah, this is the last name.
It says Linda. I thought that's Georgianne.
No, it's Jorgen. It's the last name of the other girl, I think.
What?
Go look at what the other girl's name. It's why am I blanking it? I don't know.
Yeah, Georgianne Hawkins. Jorgen. Her name is Georgianne.
Georgianne.
Yes.
Jorgen?
You're fired. That was
fired.
Bad.
Jorgen.
That was so bad.
Oh, it is. It is Georgianne. God. Silly me. But 4 other women besides Linda and Georgianne.
Georgianne. Stop. Georgianne.
Linda and
Georgianne.
Georgianne had disappeared around the same time. all within Western Washington and Northern Oregon region. A woman named Donna Gail Manson disappeared from the Evergreen State College near Olympia, Washington. Susan Rancourt disappeared from the Center Washington State College in Ellensburg, Washington, which is interesting. That's where my parents are. I just thought that was interesting. Because it's 2.5 hours east of Seattle. So it's kind of like a tiny little rural town. The fact that Ted Bundy may have been out there is very creepy.
Very creepy.
Roberta Parks disappeared from Oregon State University campus in Corvallis. Brenda Ball disappeared from the Seattle area. In less than 6 months, there were 6 women who were all the same age group and honestly looked very similar. Brunette, pretty. Isn't it interesting how all of these girls that go missing that are connected with Ted all look very similar? It's very creepy.
They do. They all have a similar personality.
Similar appearance,
persona,
yeah.
I meant to say.
Yeah.
They all have like the same middle parts. Like most of them I noticed had like middle parts and dark eyes, but lighter hair most of the time. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, it's just he was clearly, it's honestly kind of crazy that he was able to like track these targets down so quickly and find girls that looked like his type so fast. It seems.
Yeah.
Like it seemed like that's all he did was like stalking and prowling around looking for his next victim.
So freaky.
It is freaky. Once word got out that there were this many missing women in this amount of time, people started freaking out and fearing for their lives. Mass panic across Washington, especially. People were like buying guns, they were buying locks. Like it was just crazy. People were terrified that there was this murderer running loose in the area, and no one knew who he was or where they were, because there was no leads, no answers about who took these missing women or what had happened to them. So at this point, people started believing that it was probably one person or a specific group of people doing these killings, but no one had come up with the term serial killer. So Ted and Diane eventually broke up, and later on, Ted met a woman named Liz Klupfer. They almost got married. Liz had a daughter, and the three of them were a little family for a while. Despite this, Liz and Ted started having issues. They didn't have a lot in common, and Ted said that he wasn't able to make himself express his love to her, and that because of this, he would agonize about not being able to make it work with her. So that was something that he talked about, was this inability to love too. Like he didn't have any empathy or the ability to feel that, feel the perhaps most powerful energy there is, love. Like that's interesting that he completely did not have that capability.
Yeah.
Clearly didn't have it.
That would make you a fucked up person.
It would.
Yeah.
Somebody without love is a terrifying individual.
Yeah.
Because love is what ties us all together. It makes us care about each other and not want to fucking kill each other.
Yep.
So at this point in time in 1974, this is when more disappearances start happening in the lake Sammamish State Park. Sorry.
I like that. Sammamish.
Is it Sammamish?
Yep.
Okay.
During the documentary, I was like, we need to make sure we know this.
Sammamish.
Because we're going to fuck this up. Sammamish. Kind of sounds like Mamwich.
It does.
Sorry.
What a weird name. I bet you it's some type of Native American name or something.
Probably.
But on July 14th, 1974, there was a fair happening at Lake Sammamish State Park in Washington State. There were 40,000 people at the fair that day, and there were tons of different activities going on at the park. It's like a big, just kind of a big festival type thing at this state park. Tons of people just having fun, hanging out, relaxing, enjoying, unaware that there's a serial killer in the midst. Because during that one day, 2 women went missing from that park.
That's so wild. He got 2 at
That's
once.
Wild, isn't it? So brazen and I don't know, it's crazy. But a woman named Denise Naslund and another named Janice Ott. And by this time, they were the 7th and 8th girls to go missing. Once word got out that the 2 people were missing, detectives went down to the park to interview people to see if they could figure out what had happened to them. And some witnesses who were at the park said that they had seen a person approach both of the women. They said the suspect was described as a good-looking young man who was wearing an arm cast. and he approached women asking them to help load his sailboat into the car because his arm was injured, which
so freaky.
I don't understand how these women fell for that. Like,
well, back then, like, you got to remember, they didn't have many like instances of people that would do this. There was just this false sense of trust back then. Everybody like, was innocent, a good old boy, like he said, you know. And it's hard. Like, I was thinking about it. If I didn't know as much as I do about the reality of serial killers and crime, then I might have done that. Like, now I definitely wouldn't.
You'd follow a strange man back to
I wouldn't. But maybe when I was a teenager,
help him load his boat.
Maybe when I was a teenager, if I was with a friend and someone asked us, I would probably feel bad, especially if he looked nice and he was like the middle of the day in a busy parking lot. I probably would have at that age.
And I guess if you thought his arm was broken, his cast was real, you might feel bad for him.
I think especially if I was with a friend. Like, God, that's crazy. He took two at once.
Yeah, and just literally walked amongst all those people, risk being seen by tons and tons of people in order to do it.
Yeah, that's wild.
Because witnesses said that they saw Denise, who was laying on the beach with some of her friends, and when she left to go to the bathroom, which is only about 60 feet away, that was when Ted, or the man, approached her, again asking her to help to get the boat out of the water.
Oh, so he didn't get them both at the same time. Okay.
No, not at the exact same time. No, he took one, but it's like, I'm wondering what he did. He must have...
Did he just keep one in the car?
He must have like...
Knocked her out, kept her in the car.
Knocked her out, put her in the car, grabbed another one, knocked her out, put her in the car.
God, that's wild.
That's crazy. There was also other women who observed the same man approaching Janice while she was on the beach. Witnesses said that the suspect was driving a tan VW Bug. That's what's crazy too, is he was driving this tiny car.
Yeah.
He wasn't driving anything, towing a sailboat or anything like that at all, but a tiny Bug. So he must have put them in the Bug. I mean, there's no way he did anything at the park, right? That would be too risky.
No.
So he must have snatched them, knocked them out somehow. Yeah. Maybe he got chloroform or something.
Just put him in the back. Yeah, probably chloroform.
Yeah, it's crazy. But this was kind of a breaking point in the case for investigators and police because they had no idea who this was. But witnesses said that they overheard Janice introduce herself to the strange man. Janice. Janice. Yeah, sorry. Jesus.
Janice.
Janice.
We're just fucking up today.
Janice. I'm dyslexic, sorry.
No, you're not.
Janice introduced herself to the man, and then she heard the man respond, "Hi, I'm Ted." That was a big moment because the witnesses ended up telling the police that whoever the man was that likely abducted the two girls was named Ted.
And they weren't lying because it's not like they knew who he was.
No. So a task force...
God, I can't believe he used his real name. That's crazy.
Yeah, which I was surprised too. And again, it goes back to just his ego and how I think he literally felt like he was invincible.
He probably thought Ted was a pretty like friendly sounding name too. Like Ted.
But it was probably more common back then too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be like Bob or something, you know?
Yeah, ish. Yeah.
But back then, it was a lot more old school names like that for guys, especially like Tom, Bob, Peter, Ted,
Yeah.
So once police heard that the suspect could be named Ted, a task force was set up to try and figure out who this guy was. At this point, there were 8 women missing, all from and around the Seattle, Washington area. All of them were between the ages of 18 and 21, and they all had very similar appearances, with all of them having brown hair, and they were all white women. At this point, they still didn't have a suspect, and the strongest lead they had was that this dude was named Tom, or Tom. There I go. Ted. Jesus.
I like Janice. That's a good one. Janice, and then what were you calling Georgian? Jordan?
No, I was saying Janice.
Oh, yeah. Janice.
Janice?
Janice and Jorgen.
That's just butchered.
Yeah, that's really bad. Which, no disrespect to these victims, my gosh, but you are really messing up names today.
I am.
It reminds me of that one skit that I bet some people will know about
Oh,
it.
yeah. The Key and Peele one?
Yeah.
Where he's doing roll call?
Yeah, and he calls like one of the kids like Balake.
Yeah.
And Deborah instead of Deborah. And Balake instead of Blake.
Yeah. That's funny.
Anyway.
I'm just like that guy. So anyways, the police, they've got this named Ted. They immediately get to work, get the task force put together. We got to figure out who Ted is. And back then, it's all paper, guys. They had no computers, no database. So they had to do all this shit by hand. And there was 1,000 different people that they started with that could be Ted, who could, had a criminal history, fit the description, all of those types of things. But eventually, by hand, they were eventually able to narrow down that number to 100 possible suspects that these women saw at the state park. So at this point, it was August 8th, 1974, about a month after the two girls disappeared at the fair, and there were still so many unanswered questions about what was going on. And it was on that day when a call came in from Liz, who said that she was concerned about her boyfriend named Ted Bundy. She agreed to do a taped interview where she shared that their relationship had started going really south and was very rocky. She said that Ted had mentioned an incident about when one time he followed a sorority girl late at night. That's creepy. Yeah. So his girlfriend at the time, Liz, is kind of starting to take notes and realize there's something weird, sketchy going on with him. I probably should, let the police know. Because I think she started thinking that maybe it could have been him.
Yeah.
Liz also stated that she found a bag of women's underwear in her apartment and also found a bowl of house keys. That's fucking... That's so that would be pretty... I'd be like, what the...
Yeah, why are you taking house keys?
She also found a knife under the front seat of his car. She said that the night Brenda Ball disappeared, Ted was with her and her family. And she said that he left early that evening and then the next day showed up late to her daughter's baptism. So he was gone. Nobody knows where he was. Clearly, he could have definitely been the person that took Brenda Ball. The Ted that Liz described fit the description of the person directly or perfectly, the way he looked, where he lived, and the fact that he went to the University of Washington. So that places him very close to the crime scenes.
Yes.
And the fact that he drove a tan VW Bug. Everything seemed to match up. So he drives a Bug. The witnesses said that the man named Ted drove a Bug. So they're starting to connect dots here. They looked further in to see if someone was able to provide an alibi for Ted that proved that he wasn't at the fair that day when the girls went missing. And when they couldn't find any sort of reason to believe that it wasn't him, Ted became the prime suspect. However, investigators prepared a photo lineup that was shown to some witnesses, and 7 out of the 8 women said they were positive that the photo of Ted Bundy was not the suspect Ted. Which Ted, one of the interesting things about him is he was a master of disguise and a master of changing his appearance. And before he went into this photo lineup, he actually altered his appearance. I think he combed his hair the other way or parted it the opposite way. Just something simple like that he was hoping would basically throw the witnesses off. And 7 out of the 8 women did not identify Ted Bundy as the suspect. So this just is another example of him just being cunning and devious, and just, the fact that he was constantly like 2 steps ahead of everybody else, I think really attributed to him making this run. But at this point in time, the murders had stopped. They started making investigators wonder if the person had left Washington or died. So it kind of went quiet for a while and nobody else died. So they were like, what happened? Well, where'd he go? And this is when murders start happening in Utah. Ugh. So Ted, being the intelligent individual he was, he knew that he had to get out of Washington, that the heat was starting to get too hot for him. So he said he had to move to a different jurisdiction. So in August 1974, Bundy received a second acceptance from the University of Utah Law School. He left Liz and moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, even though he called Liz often while he was dating other women. While he was there, he became a member of the Mormon Church. Of course he did. Because he's like,
Utah.
Yeah, of course.
He's like, great place to meet women to take.
Yeah, I think he just knew, like,
it's a good place to meet. And it's good for his, like,
Image.
Yeah. Like, who's going to blame a
Mormon law
guy?
student?
Yeah.
Serial killer?
Yeah.
So, yeah, very, very smart. He was known as a great member of the church and was very involved in all the meetings. They, in the Netflix series, they interview, I think, one of the Mormon teachers or preachers or whatever, and he said that, like, Ted just was totally into it and seemed like a really nice guy. And that's the thing about Ted, is he has this like charismatic, almost like charming personality in a sick way, that he's able to like get people to like him and talk to him and trust him very quickly. During the fall of 1974, a woman named Melissa from Utah was found murdered. She apparently told her father that she was going to meet a friend at a restaurant in Midvale. The friend said that they hung out for a while and then Melissa left to go back home. However, she never made it home. 9 days later, her body was found. She had been beaten and strangled to death, sexually assaulted, just brutalized. In addition to Melissa, there were 2 other disappearances in Utah. A young woman named Nancy Wilcox disappeared after leaving her home, and her body was never found. Laura Amy was also vanished, was later found in the mountains. Her body had been severely assaulted as well.
Oh, God. So sad.
It is. It's terrible. On Friday, November 8th, 1974, a woman named Carol was shopping at a mall when she was approached by a man dressed as a police officer who told her that they found someone trying to break into her car and that she would need to come out to the car to see if anything was missing. And this is actually one of the only survivors of a Ted Bundy attack.
She's in the documentary.
Very interesting and very scary. So Carol goes out to the car with Ted, and Ted's like, look in the car to see if anything's missing. And she's like looking at it. She's like, it looks fine. It looks fine.
He clearly wanted her to like lean in there so we could push her in. And
yeah, exactly. And when she refused to do that, Ted started getting frustrated and was like, I'm get in my car. I'll take you back to the station, and we'll figure it out there.
They said that they had some people and they wanted to help identify someone to see if it was them.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So she agreed to go.
So she was like, okay.
But she asked for a badge first.
Right. She asked him for a badge. Yeah.
So
he went, where did he get this stuff from?
It could have been a fake badge.
Yeah, it could have been.
What it was.
But what's so weird is that he wasn't in a police car. He was driving a VW Bug. So, which I think that raised major red flags for Carol. And that's when she started getting sketched out. But she thought, okay, maybe he's an undercover cop. So she went with him.
God.
So they started driving down a side street and then suddenly pulled over on the side of the curb. And that's when the man grabbed her and tried to handcuff her. He got one cuff on, but couldn't get the other on. He then pulled out a gun and said, I'll blow your head off. Somehow Carol was able to get out of the car. The man tried to hit her with a crowbar when another car started coming. Carol was able to get loose and run to the car. She jumped in the car and had them take her to the police station.
She was so lucky.
Little did she know that she was literally escaped one of the most notorious serial killers of all time.
Yeah, and then he went and killed someone else right after because he was mad.
Yep. 4 hours later, a woman named Deborah Kent was killed.
Oh, God.
Deborah was attending a play with her high school. She left the play early to go pick up her brother, and Debbie never even made it to the car.
Wow, Jesus.
Wow, he went from that, not even rattled by that at all, clearly, immediately on to the next thing. Didn't even think that maybe I'm surprised he didn't try to go after her again.
Seriously.
To keep her from talking and stuff.
Yeah, I'm surprised too.
So while police were searching the parking lot where her car was at, they discovered a key that went to a pair of handcuffs. It was soon discovered that the key was the key that fit into the handcuffs that were placed on Carol, concluding that it was the same person. So that at this point, connections are starting to be made between the different cases in Utah now, that they have the same person. Because back in Washington, months were going by with no leads as to what happened to all the women that went missing there. On March 5th, 1975, 5 bodies were discovered in Taylor Mountain in Washington. A group of student foresters were on Taylor Mountain marking trees when they came across a skull. Which that would be... I've always wondered that, like, how creepy and terrifying it would be to come across, like, human remains
really
just
freaky.
like walking through the woods.
That'd be freaky as fuck.
And honestly, that's like always a possibility. I mean, if not human remains, but animal remains. Mm-hmm. A group of student foresters were on, this ended up being the skull of Brenda Ball. Investigators got there and discovered remains of 3 other women within 100 feet of each other. The remains of Linda Healy, Brenda Ball, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Kathleen Parks were all discovered in the same area.
That's insane.
Yeah. So he took them all up there to dispose of them, which in the documentary, he talks about how it was like a garbage disposal for him. Like it was a way for him to dump body parts and have the animals clean up his,
that's crazy.
Clean up the remains for him. Terrible. The remains of, in addition, just a few miles away from the remains of those 4 girls, they found remains of 2 girls from Lake Sammamish State Park Fair who went missing as well. Denise Naslin and Janice.
Oh my God.
So this basically solidified the fact that all these kidnappings and murders were done by the same person because of the fact that these women went missing from different areas, but were all found in the same area, right? I mean, I guess it could be multiple killers too that were using one location. But this is when the term serial killer started being used to describe this type of person. Even though they found remains and weren't able to do many tests on the bodies because of the fact they didn't have the technology that we do today, of course. So they weren't able to actually figure out how those bodies were killed or who was handling them through forensic testing, through DNA testing and all the other types of forensic tests we have today. It literally didn't provide any information for them, very little, as to what actually happened to them and who did it. It was
pretty similar to the other girls. Probably wasn't nice.
Yeah. No, it was not nice at all. So Ted is, realizing, heat's back on him in Utah, so it's time to move on to Colorado, actually. So Colorado at this time was facing an issue with disappearances, actually. And on January 27th, 1975, a woman named Karen Campbell disappeared from a hotel in Aspen. Karen was on vacation with her fiance and his children, and they had just got done eating dinner at a restaurant. Carol and her fiance were sitting in the lobby enjoying the fireplace when Karen decided that she was going to go up to her room to grab a magazine to read. She got in the elevator, and that was the last time she was seen.
So fucking scary.
So he's just rolling around everywhere, actively looking for a victim and just taking advantage of. It's crazy. Like, it seems like such small windows of time that he's taking these women, and it's just crazy that nobody's seeing him do this.
Yeah, it is.
Because, like, obviously, like with her and probably some others, it's not like every single woman just willingly like followed him somewhere.
No.
So he had to have like literally grabbed them and like forcefully took them wherever he wanted to go. 36 days later, her body was found almost 3 miles away from the hotel. The coroner was able to estimate that Karen died about 2 hours after she had dinner with her family.
Ugh.
God. After this, there were 2 other women in Colorado that had gone missing, a 26-year-old woman named Julie Cunningham from Vail and a 24-year-old woman named Denise Oliverson from Grand Junction. They both vanished out of nowhere. One thing that is important to note is the fact that even though all these disappearances and killings were happening within several states of each other, happening in ways that were all similar to each other, with all victims that were similar, the state's investigators still didn't have any sort of communication with each other, so they couldn't put the pieces together to create a bigger picture of what was going on. They literally had no idea what was going on from one state to the next, which was all part of Ted Bundy's plan. And
yeah, to trick them.
Yeah, exactly, to trick them. And he knew by moving states that it decreased his chances of getting caught, because in the new state, when he initially got there, they wouldn't know who he was, or he'd be able to just cruise around. But it was August of 1975, and almost a year had passed from the time Carol was kidnapped, and the police still had no suspect. One night, a highway patrolman was in a residential area in Salt Lake City when he saw a VW Bug driving down the street with its lights off. He became suspicious and tried to stop the car. However, it tried to run from him. After chasing it for a while, the car eventually pulled over. The driver was arrested for failing to stop on command of a police officer identified as Ted Bundy, which I'm like, it's interesting that Ted, like the ways that he gets caught is like from traffic stops.
Yeah.
Which is so weird. Because he was driving erratically or like with his lights off. So that happened
to him, like, we'll talk about it more,
multiple
but like 3 times.
Multiple times, yeah.
Wow, what are the chances?
But I'm just like, if you're really doing all this crazy shit, like why would you drive erratically and attract attention to you? Like sometimes I'm like, did he want to get caught?
Well, they say that sociopaths like to drive fast, so there you go.
Yeah, but if he's so smart, wouldn't you like want to drive like super proper to evade the police and not get pulled over?
You would think.
Yeah, you would think. So they arrested him and they identified him as Ted Bundy. Ted immediately wanted to hire a lawyer, so he hired Bruce Lubbock and John O'Connell. At first, the case was just a thought of as not a big deal, but they just some misdemeanor charges because they didn't know about all the connections that he had to the disappearances in Washington. So they started thinking about that there could be more to this case than just a traffic stop. When the police searched Ted's car, they found several objects, including a ski mask, an ice pick, some strips of torn up sheet, a crowbar, pantyhose, and handcuffs. Not normal at all.
No.
Ted closely matched the description of the kidnapper of Carol. The crowbar, the handcuffs, the car itself, and the description of the suspect. Carol was asked to come down and take a look at him in the lineup. When Ted was brought into the lineup, he had drastically changed his appearance, like we talked about before, and he cut his hair. And when people looked at him, Carol was still able to identify him, even though, and she knew he was trying to evade being identified, but she knew right away.
He could easily change his appearance, though. Like there was a picture in the documentary of all of the different versions of his hair and stuff and his different appearances, and he looked pretty different in them. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah. But from that moment, once she identified him, he was actually charged with her kidnapping. So from that moment on, people started believing that maybe Ted Bundy was the Ted that they were looking for in regards to all the other disappearances.
Yeah, you think so?
So at this point, the states started talking to each other and started looking at the similarities between the cases. And they actually set up like a multi-state conference in order to like compare case notes and things like that to try to figure out if Ted Bundy was the killer behind all of the missing women. During this time, the trial for Carol's case against Ted was being put together. The people that were in the same church as Ted all strongly believed that they had the wrong guy and that Ted was innocent. He literally had like the Mormon church behind him completely saying accurate. He was like, innocent.
And his family too.
Right.
His mom, she held out for a long time on him being innocent.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so he definitely had like supporters behind him during Carol's trial, which her trial was on February 23rd, 1976. It had tons of publicity. Ted insisted that he wasn't guilty and said that he still had every intention of completing law school and becoming a lawyer after this. Ted had decided against a jury trial and decided that he wanted the case to be before Judge Hanson without a jury.
So that means the judge makes the final guilty or not guilty verdict. So that's putting a lot of faith in the judge's hand.
It is.
It's an interesting choice to make.
It is. Whether it was the right one for him is up for debate. But Carol said that during the trial, when she was testifying, the court was constantly trying to confuse her or trip her up. But Carol said she was positive that he was the one that took her. And because of this, the judge found Ted Bundy guilty of the kidnapping. Ted was given a 90-day evaluation where he went to the Utah State Prison for an evaluation conducted by psychologists. This was to help the judge determine whether he should send Bundy to prison or put him on probation. During the evaluation, one of the things he was asked to talk about was his childhood and upbringing. The psychologist also talked to Ted's family members, all who said they couldn't believe he would do anything like this. The psychologist also talked to some of his past girlfriends, and one woman specifically told the psychologist that there was a time when Ted and her went swimming together, and Ted held her head under water and then let her up, take a breath, and pushed her down again, essentially like drowning her.
Scary.
So I think that was enough for the psychologist to start thinking, he is capable of being a violent individual. And he also learned about the abusive past of his grandfather, and as well as the fact that Ted didn't know who his real father was, and his mother didn't keep him. So I mean, the psychologist was smart and made the right decision that Ted should not be a candidate for probation. So the judge sentenced him to something called an indeterminate term of 1 to 15 years. On October 21st, 1976, while Ted Bundy was in jail, he was confronted by 3 people who informed him that they had a warrant for his arrest for the murder of Karen Campbell from Colorado. They acquired a search warrant for his house, and when they were there, they found a brochure for the Wildwood Inn, which is the same hotel that Karen and her family were staying in, was the last place she was to be seen. So that's interesting. So Ted was charged with first-degree murder with premeditation, which at that time meant eligibility of death penalty. One thing that was interesting and very unusual is that Utah allowed him to be extradited to Colorado to have his trial there. And the reason they did this was because the Colorado case had to do with a murder as opposed to a kidnapping, so obviously more serious. And Ted agreed that he wanted to go to Colorado and that he was confident he could win that case as well. So they placed him in a jail in Aspen, which is, not all that far from us, up in the mountains, a beautiful place. The X Games were there, actually. Mm-hmm. And the new jail wasn't treating him like he was better because he was charming, good looking, and smart like the other jail was. So this jail was worse for him because he felt like he was getting not the treatment that he deserved. They just kind of treated him like an animal, like any other inmate.
He felt like he was so special.
He did. And he was very confident in everything that came out of his mouth. He chose his words.
Literally laugh.
Yeah.
Like when he was saying that he wanted to be a lawyer and stuff, he's like, "Oh, I'll get out of here and I'll still get my law degree."
Yeah, smiling all the time.
Just like, "Oh,
no big deal."
And he acts like he's some like I said earlier, like some famous person, like he's like a big like movie star or something he acted how O.J. Simpson did, but O.J. Simpson's famous. But even in the media, he still waved and like the whole like acted like he was a well-known famous person that the crowd loved. Why was he always smiling at people and waving at them? No one was sitting there saying, "Yay, Ted!" It was all this illusion for him to like pretend like he was almost acting like a politician would if they were under some heat.
Just or like bizarre. He was putting on a show or something almost.
Definitely putting on a show. But for who?
Yeah, exactly.
Because everyone's against you. So people were like screaming out in the streets at him and stuff. And he was smiling back.
And that's where you could say like he's completely delusional.
Yeah, he pretty much is. But he would
even though he thought he was normal. He always said, "I'm normal. I'm just a normal guy.
Just a regular dude.
Just a normal guy." And he insisted that he was 100% innocent and that he was confident that he was going to get out. As the months passed, Ted started doing activities like jumping off the top bunk of his cell over and over again to strengthen his legs.
Why?
He also said that he was able to get a good measurement of how many feet were between the corner of the courthouse to the alley, from the alley to the riverbed, and then the riverbed to the mountains. He did like little sprints inside his cell space as well, and he ran those distances over and over again, literally planning his escape.
I'm sorry, but like jumping on and off, that's like really smart to build up your legs. Like he really fucking
thought through everything.
He clearly was like obsessed with it to the point where that's all he thought about was his escape and everything.
And keeping things hidden and concealed.
Yep.
I mean, that was his full-time job.
Yep.
So he also practiced how fast he could change his clothes from his courtroom attire to his shorts, and also cut his hair prior to the court appearance. So altered his appearance, cut his hair to hopefully escape from the Aspen jail. It's crazy that he even escapes. So before we get into escapes, I just want to thank our last couple sponsors here real quick. This episode of the Mile Higher Podcast is brought to you by Lola. Lola gives women a peace of mind about what they're putting in their bodies because Lola products are 100% organic cotton. What are Lola products? Kendall?
Sorry, I thought you were about to read it. Lola is tampons.
Pads,
something that
all menstrual products.
Oh, they do pads too? I'm not a pads girl, but that's awesome to know. And
liners, all of it.
The truth about most products these types of products is they're not made with the best materials. And like, there's corporate execs making the decisions of what's going into these, Playtex, that kind of stuff. And Lola, you can trust it. And also you can feel good about buying from them because they give back to other women who are in need, as there are so many women around the world that don't have access to basic feminine hygiene products.
Homeless women, low income and homeless is a big problem.
So that's why I really like it, and I can feel good about using it. The quality is great. They're comfortable.
Environmentally
I really like them.
Friendly.
And you know what's cool is one thing that my grandpa always said to me, the one who's in the hospital right now, if you didn't hear in our last episode, I explained this, but my grandpa's his like favorite quote was, "This too shall pass." And when I was a kid, my mom would always say that to me all the time. And then she'd say, "Yeah, Grandy said that to me when I was a kid." And then I got the Lola box.
Which are really cool, right?
Yeah. The boxes are really cute. It's like a whole subscription thing. And when I opened it up, on the inside of the box, it said, "This too shall pass."
Yeah.
It was like a nice little note from them.
That was cool.
I was like, oh my gosh, it was such a sign. So yeah, I really like it. It's a very, very cool product.
Yeah. So like you said, it's a subscription box, fully customizable. You can start it when you want. You can change the number of boxes, frequency of delivery. It's super flexible. You can skip, change, or cancel at any time. And what's cool is this company was actually started by women. It's run by women.
Yep.
So obviously they're going to know what's best for women.
And they have women in mind.
Yeah.
Because like I said, a lot of those corporate execs that are, the big companies, it's a lot of men up in there.
They do. Yeah, exactly.
Do you want them to design your stuff? Not really.
Yeah, exactly. So for 40% off all subscriptions, you can visit mylola.com and enter Mile Higher when you subscribe. That's mylola.com and enter Mile Higher. We also want to thank Calm for their continued support of our podcast, which we all need some calm, especially during this episode, because my God, talking about this horrible individual. But meditation is extremely important for your mental health and well-being. It improves many different things in your life, including reducing stress and anxiety. Is just one of the few things that it does for me. I mean, it can do so much more for you spiritually.
It's been helping me a lot lately with all the stress I've had, family stress.
Yeah, kind of just, a very good way to melt that all away. Mm-hmm. And Calm makes it super easy. It's the #1 app to help you sleep, meditate, and relax. If you head to calm.com Mile Higher, you'll get 25% off a Calm premium subscription, which includes hundreds of hours of programs, including guided meditations on issues like anxiety, stress, and focus, including a brand new meditation each day called the Daily Calm. There's also sleep stories, which are bedtime stories for adults designed to help you relax before you doze off. So when you get done listening to our podcast while you're falling asleep, you can pop over to the Calm app and put on another sleep story.
I love their sleep stories.
And you can head to the lavender fields of France with Stephen Fry, or explore New Zealand with Jerome Flynn from Game of Thrones. Bob Ross is in there too. Like I always say, Matthew McConaughey's in there as well. I like his voice a lot.
You do.
I don't know why.
You love him.
There's also soothing music, ambient music, breathing exercises, gentle stretches to relax your body, and more. It literally is everything you can possibly want to help you calm down. Yeah. It's in the Calm app. So for a limited time, Mile Higher listeners get 25% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/Mile Higher. That's CALM.com/Mile Higher. Get unlimited access to all of Calm's content today at calm.com/Mile Higher. Give yourself the Get the Calm and a happy and healthy year. Ted escapes multiple times. So it's the morning of June 7th, 1977, the preliminary hearing, and they had just gotten finished with the first half. We're having a break. Ted was in the back of the court library doing research because Ted opted to represent himself, so he is allowed to, research for his case. When all of a sudden, people weren't able to find Ted anywhere. It wasn't long until someone from the bottom floor came upstairs and yelled that someone had jumped from the second-story window of the courthouse, and Ted was on the run. So Ted basically just took off and went straight into the mountains with nothing, and days went by, and they hadn't found Ted. They had bloodhounds, helicopters. They had the whole 9 yards out there.
Yeah,
they even got the FBI involved 3 days after he went missing, but they were not able to find Ted at all, which is actually
crazy,
really astounding, because Aspen's a really small mountain town.
Yeah.
And there's only one
but
way
there's a lot of
in,
nature to
one
hide
way
in.
out.
You can
And,
hide behind stuff, you know?
It's just mountains and like little homes and cabins. And
Freaky. I can't believe he got out. That's so insane.
yeah, the fact that he escaped in the mountains.
Honestly, though, I can't fucking believe he was able to just jump out and that they left him in there alone. Like, what idiots.
Right?
I'm sorry. That's so dumb.
Oh, I know. So he goes up there and he ends up running into like an abandoned cabin, and luckily got into it and stayed there, slept there the first night, ate some food. But then after that, he was just kind of like wandering around, and then it started sleeting and rain. And he talks about how it just like completely shook him to his core because he was so cold. And he literally, like a few days later, decided to come back and just turn himself back in because he was so cold and hungry. And before he turned himself in, he actually came back into Aspen and found a car that had keys in the ignition and stole it and started driving off. But it didn't take long for an officer to notice the car driving really crazy. When he pulled it over, it was Ted. So Ted actually stole the car and tried to like escape out of Aspen. I think he got like a mile or so down the road when this officer, obviously they had everything like, officers everywhere, noticed him driving erratically again. It's like, wow. Wonder if it was because he was tired or cold, or just he was nervous and maybe he was a bad driver.
Or he's just a fucking sociopath and he wasn't.
Yeah, or just didn't think he'd be caught or anything.
They're just reckless.
Yeah. So after he got pulled over, he was arrested and he now faced new charges of escape. So fast forward to later that year on December 30th, 1977, Ted was in prison waiting for the murder trial of Karen Campbell. The guard had just dropped off Ted his dinner in his cell and left. And the next morning, the guard came back and noticed that his food was never eaten. And that's when he thought he saw Ted in his bed because there was like a lump in the bed. And when the guard went in there, he realized that it was just a bunch of books under the blanket and that Ted had managed to escape again. What he actually did is he somehow cut a hole in the ceiling of his cell just big enough that he could slip through, which when he was gone for those several days in the mountains, he lost it was almost like a week, I think he was missing. And he lost like 25 pounds or something.
Yeah,
it was
he
crazy.
just wasn't eating anything.
Not eating, yeah.
He had that mental like strength to get
Right.
through the hunger too, because he did that another time we'll talk about as well.
Yeah, so he was small enough. He got himself to a weight that he could literally slip through the hole in the ceiling, which went into another apartment of one of the jailers, and he stole some of his clothes and then took off and escaped right out the front doors of the jail. So at this point, everybody's like, "Are you kidding me? How'd you guys let this guy escape again?" And it was this time that they could not find him at all, and he was gone for a while. And at this point, law enforcement's like just freaking out because now we have no idea where he went. He's probably, long gone out of Aspen at this point. So they got the FBI involved again, and they actually put Ted Bundy on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. So it was at this point that Ted, being the individual that he was, decided that I need to get to the opposite side of the country because the likelihood of them knowing about me or the things that I've done will be less likely.
Really space it out.
So what's crazy is he actually managed to get on Greyhound buses, and then he went to Chicago, and then from Chicago he flew down to Atlanta or to Georgia, I think, and then he took another bus and went down to Tallahassee, Florida. And this is when the murders in Florida happened. So it was January 14, 1978. Ted's been missing for 16 days when all of a sudden news broke that a man broke into, is it the Chi Omega? Right? Chi Omega sorority house.
Chi Omega.
Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University, and murdered 2 women and almost murdered 4, actually. There was 2 women that managed to survive, but the victims were Margaret Bowman, who was molested and beaten to death in her sleep, and Lisa Levy, who was also asleep. 2 other girls named Karen Candler and Kathy Kleiner were attacked while sleeping, but ended up surviving, although they had no recollection of who the attacker was. They kind of, I think they, I don't think those 2 girls actually saw, but other girls that were in the house managed to kind of see him coming in, I think. But that same night, police received a call from someone who was reporting sounds coming from their neighbor's unit of someone getting beat up inside a duplex they lived in. Jeez. The duplex was about 6 blocks away from the sorority house, and when police showed up, they found a young woman named Cheryl Thomas who was brutally beaten and murdered. And again, like, all of these poor women and victims were either raped or sexually assaulted in some way before they were murdered. So it was really, really brutal, gruesome stuff that was happening to them. On February 9th, 1978, a 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach, who lived in Lake City, Florida, went missing from school. She walked out of the school in the morning and then just disappeared. Then on February 15th, 6 days later in Pensacola, Florida, Ted was arrested. A police officer saw him driving really slow and just had an odd feeling, so he pulled him over, and it turned out that the man was driving a stolen Tallahassee car and was also carrying over 20 stolen credit cards. At first, the man refused to give his identity, and they said they didn't know who he was. However, he eventually said his name was Kenneth Meisner, and he was 29 years old from Tallahassee. So basically what Ted did was assumed this identity of this man named Kenneth Meisner, and the real guy was actually in jail and contacted the police eventually to say, hey, that's not me. I'm already in jail, so we don't know who that is. And once police found out that, Ted still refused to like give up his real identity, which back then driver's licenses were just like little slips of paper, like that you would print on a little old fashioned like typewriter type situation, which is so weird. So there was no picture associated with the ID. You could just wield an ID and be like, this is me.
Oh, you could get away with so much shit.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy.
I just wanted to say I'm trying not to talk too much and interrupt Josh because I have to go to a doctor's appointment and I want to make sure we get all the information in. So that's why I'm being quiet right now, letting Josh just get information out.
Yeah, that's all right.
And I'm having major jaw pain.
So the police were able to eventually figure out that the stolen car he was driving was stolen somewhere near the Chi Omega sorority house. They also discovered that most of the credit cards that were stolen were from a bar that was next to the Chi Omega sorority house as well. Additionally, it was discovered that Ted was living in a house that was only 4 blocks away from the sorority house before and after the murders happened. It wasn't until the next day on February 16th when police agreed to let his unknown person call, or let Ted, who was the unknown person, call his girlfriend Liz if he agreed to give his identity. On the phone, he told Liz that he was sick and was trying to maintain a normal life, but that he couldn't contain this force that was controlling him, which is interesting. Police finally found out that the person they had was Ted Bundy all along and was one of the 10 most wanted criminals in the country.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine figuring that out?
Yeah, God, and he was just like, yeah, I'm surprised he didn't escape again there. But luckily in Florida, they had a much more secure prison that they were keeping him in. So escape would have been much harder, especially once they found out he was Ted Bundy. It was later discovered what had happened was Ted escaped from the Aspen jail, which we talked about. He actually, what's interesting, when he went to Ann Arbor in Michigan, after he went to Chicago, and while he was there, he actually went to a football game, the Rose Bowl, his alma mater, alma mater, University of Washington, was playing the University of Michigan in the Rose Bowl. So he just casually went to that. He said that while he was there, he went to a bar and almost got beat up by a bunch of Michigan fans. And then he went to a Methodist church where he spent the night. And then, that's when he went down to
That's so risky to go to a bar and get drunk and fight with people. What the fuck? He was crazy.
Oh, I know. It's crazy.
Completely insane.
So at this point, like, police are really starting to connect the dots in Florida and realizing that the person that, murdered the sorority girls was likely the same person that took Kimberly Leach, the 12-year-old schoolgirl. And they were actually able to track the purchases from stolen credit cards and figure out that he had spent the night in the Lake City Holiday Inn the night before Kim went missing, which the hotel was less than 3 miles from the school. That's crazy.
That is.
That's so creepy. Like, he would just act on impulse. It seemed like
he didn't plan too much.
No, not too much, but he was such a quick thinker. He just could process everything so quickly.
And decide what to do.
So in April 1978, Ted was officially charged with murder from both the Chi Omega and Kim Leach murders. One thing that investigators were able to do was imprints of Ted's teeth and match the imprints to a bite mark that was left on one of the sorority victims' bodies, on the butt, actually. further tying him to the
I can't
murders.
believe he would bite people. It's so gross.
Yeah, which the bite marks are like, the people that saw it said that it would literally look like somebody took like the hardest bite they possibly could and then did it again, because it left that much of an imprint.
So gross and sad.
So on July 7th, 1978, Ted was formally indicted and charged with 2 counts of burglary, 2 counts of first-degree murder, and 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder in the state of Florida. So let's talk about the sorority girls trial. So it's now May 9th, 1979, and it was time for Ted's pretrial. That was the first time a trial was going to be covered by so much mass media. There was literally media from all 50 states. There was like 9 other countries there. This was like the first time they were doing real like live feeds and everything. So it was a really big deal. And it was also the first time really that they were letting cameras into the courtroom and stuff too.
Yes, that was different too.
Which at this point, the defense's goal was to try and save Ted from getting the death penalty. The court made an offer to Ted that if he pleaded guilty to the crimes, he would be saved from the death penalty. But on June 1st, 1979, Ted Bundy entered the court, and to everyone's surprise, he rejected the plea bargain because he thought he was smarter than all the lawyers and the judge. And after this, a public defender, Mike Minerva asked to withdraw from the case because he's like, this guy's not even going to take our counsel, so I don't want to be a part of his sinking ship. Which the judge denied this request because he didn't want to draw out this case any longer than needed, in which Mike changed his role to advisory counsel. And meanwhile, Ted himself wanted to be involved in the case, and so the judge allowed him to represent himself as his own lawyer, even though he technically wasn't a lawyer, which is really crazy to think about. Fast forward a month to July 1st, when the pretrial was over and the real trial was about to begin on the deaths of the sorority girls. The case was moved from Tallahassee to Miami due to the fact that people in Tallahassee were too familiar with the case to be on a jury. By this time, a lawyer named Margaret Good joined the defense team. The defense was making the argument that Ted Bundy was incompetent and that he wasn't capable of understanding all of the evidence that was brought against him. Because of this, they decided to hold a competency hearing. The judge ruled that he was indeed competent and also in charge of the defense, which is crazy to think about.
Fucking
wild. Like, is unheard of.
Yeah, it really is. This judge was fucking weird.
Yeah, it was really weird. So because of this, Ted was able to essentially like say whatever he wanted and just do really weird things. He'd say really irrational things, but he just thought he was outsmarting everybody. He also started making requests to the judge for things like more outside time, more time in the library, more conference periods, access to a typewriter, a change of menu because he was sick of eating the same grilled cheese every day. So he's totally taken advantage of the situation, and whether or not he thought he could actually like get away with it, I think he saw a window of opportunity to try and manipulate and take advantage of the, very, I don't know, almost incompetent judicial system back then. When it was time for the police officer who found one of the bodies to testify, Ted Bundy was the one who got to cross-examine him because he was leading the defense. So the prosecution brought up the officer that responded to the sorority crime scene, and then, and their whole goal was to not bring up the gore or anything crazy that, they actually saw there, and focus more on the victims. But then, as soon as he finished with him, Ted went up to the stand and cross-examined this guy and literally had this guy explain in vivid detail the wounds, the
like he was
amount of blood, where they were punctured, all of these.
What position was she laying in when you arrived?
Really creepy, weird shit.
It sounded like something from someone who knew what condition she was in and exactly what that guy thought. He was asking questions that he knew would be provocative. Yeah,
and there's video of him just like clearly
I can't believe the judge allowed
and
that.
The judge is just like,
it's fucking so weird.
Just sitting there chilling, like acting like no big deal that a potential serial killer is cross-examining a witness. Like, what the hell? And I mean, he made this guy say all this graphic shit in front of all these people. And at one point, the defense attorneys were so fed up with Ted's behavior in the courtroom that they just got up and left. And during that trial, a forensic odontologist, Dr. Richard Severin, testified when it came time to talk about the bite marks on one of the victim's body and that they could prove that these bite marks matched Ted. So this was actually the kind of, I think, the evidence that kind of sunk his ship, is that they had this expert witness come forward, and he basically took measurements of Ted Bundy's mouth and his teeth and molds of his teeth.
Yeah.
And they basically came, in front of the jury, was like his teeth, which were just like a crooked teeth, matched up with the bite marks on the victim.
I mean, what else more evidence do you need? That's
really.
Like, you're done.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that today that's considered junk science. Like, there's no actual real science that you can do. Like, they don't use that today. Bite marks, because like your teeth, how are you supposed to like line up exactly what your teeth are? It's not definitive evidence.
It's not definitive, but I think it still can be presented as a possibility.
Yeah, but I read a thing
sure
that they don't even really do it anymore unless it's like really. And that was the thing, is it just showed like, basically the defense is like, this is just, it's a reach because we don't know for sure if, those are his teeth. Just because they're crooked teeth doesn't mean that it was Ted's crooked teeth that made the bite marks. And then on July 20th, during the trial, Ted refused to show up for court that day. Apparently, a guard went to go get Ted from his cell, and he refused to get up. And then the guard noticed that the lock had been jammed with wet toilet paper. Ted had stuffed wet toilet paper in the lock to keep it from locking. The judge charged him with contempt of court for failing to show up. Later on that morning, they were eventually able to get Ted to show up in the court, which there's a scene in the documentary on Netflix. It's really interesting to see Ted come in there, and he's like trying to make his case and shaking his finger at the judge and stuff, because he was upset that he felt like the court and prosecutors and jury were all just railroading him. Like he wasn't getting fair treatment. But on July 24th, it was time for the counsel to make their closing arguments and for the jury to start deliberating. And after 6.5 hours, the jury returned to the courtroom to give their verdict. It was announced that the jury found Ted guilty on all of the charges against him, and that he was eligible for the death penalty.
God, I wish we had some more time. I'm trying not to talk so that we don't run out of time, because we literally have like minutes.
Okay.
Before I have to go to the doctors. I didn't realize how long this episode would go. But yeah, I wish we had more time to talk about the death penalty and our opinions on that, because yeah, it's a whole nother conversation. I'm kind of like somewhere in the middle, but yeah. So
basically,
continue. Sorry.
Yes. So basically, Ted ends up getting the death penalty in that case of the sorority girls. They ended up giving him that sentence, and he also went and stood trial in November of 1979 for the murder of Kim Leach. And a lot of people thought it was a waste of time to even try him for that, since he was already facing the death penalty. But the prosecutors thought we absolutely have to charge him guilty, and they wanted to just reinforce that death penalty. And they had tons and tons of evidence tying Ted Bundy to the murder of Kimberly Leach. And, there was blood in the van. There was all these fibers of Kim's clothing in the van. They also found Ted's fibers on Kim's clothing. So clearly Ted Bundy took this poor little girl and then sexually assaulted her and murdered her. And the prosecutor in the documentary said that when they found this girl's body, he's like, I haven't cried since I was like 13. And he's like, I don't know, 16 now. And he's like, the day that we found Kimberly's body, I just cried.
I would too.
Because
my God.
He's like,
she was so young.
And the brutality of what she went through based upon the state of her body was just unreal. Like unlike anything he had ever seen before. Just evil shit. So eventually on February 10, 1980, it was announced that the jury reached a guilty verdict, and also came to the conclusion that the death penalty would be appropriate. So he ended up being charged with it twice. Now, after they conclude with that trial, Ted is still professing his innocence and saying that he was wrongly accused. He's got his mom behind him still, and I believe he even ended up marrying a girl that was like a family friend.
Well, he proposed to her like in
the courtroom. Yeah,
it was so bizarre.
It's really bizarre. And so they were like, we're going to fight this. We're going to appeal the death penalty.
Yeah.
And
he was just in such delusion.
And basically he sat on death row, and he said he was doing a bunch of drugs, and he just was just kind of losing it. And Carol was the woman that we're talking about that he had had his back, said he was innocent, kind of spoke out for him. And they actually got together, and she would come and visit him in prison. And they actually had sex while she was visiting him in prison somehow. And she got pregnant and had a child named Rosa with Ted. And this is where the journalists that come in and record all these tapes of Ted talking about his crimes and everything.
Yeah.
And basically his entire life.
It was like his chance to do it.
All of that's in this documentary, which we'll link for you guys. You should definitely watch it if you haven't seen it after listening to this, because to hear it from him is just so eerie and creepy, and it really gives you more understanding than we can give you just talking about him. But over the next couple years, he tried to get lawyers to get appeals, and eventually they took it all the way to the Florida Supreme Court. And his final appeal, which was January 20th, 1989, was rejected. And basically the Florida governor, Bob Martinez, signed a death warrant. And so he was officially assigned to be executed in the electric chair on Tuesday, January 1989. And in his final days, Ted actually confessed to the crimes. To the FBI actually went and got a bunch of intel from him and actually used him to get information about serial killers and profiling. And Ted tried to help them, but Ted eventually confessed to being involved up to 30 murders of young women across the country, spanning 5 or 6 states. And some have speculated that it may even be more than that. Some have said it could be even to the triple digits, because there was one point in which I think he indicated that it could be the triple digits. So for all we know, there's at least 30, could be more. And out of those 30, there's still a bunch. There's, I think, at least 6 or 8 that are unidentified still. We have no idea who they are. We've never found their remains. There's many victims of his. We've never found his remains or anything. And he talked a little bit about what he did with some of the bodies and shit. It's just really crazy.
Yeah, it's really gross.
He'd take their heads and he would keep their heads. And he confessed to being into necrophilia, which is having sex with a dead body, and just really creepy, disgusting things. He was just a vile human. But he did confess, and he tried to get religious at the end, of course. But at 5 a.m. on the day that he was scheduled to be executed, he was fed the traditional breakfast of steak and eggs. And that morning, there were hundreds of people who showed up outside the prison to have a celebration of his death. Literally, there was almost like a carnival going outside of the prison where he was, because people were so happy and excited to see him get executed and just his life taken. That they had fireworks, and there was shirts that said "Burn Bundy, burn," and there was just all these little things that were celebrating his execution.
People were so happy on the day he was executed.
Yeah.
People were just so disgusted by him, especially because of his arrogance and the way he was acting. Yeah,
I mean,
Ted
just
Bundy's
so full of himself.
Freaky fuck.
He was. And when he got the electric chair, which I'm pretty sure we don't even use the electric chair anymore anywhere.
What?
But basically they strap you into a wooden chair, and they put like a coil around your one of your ankles, and then you have something on your head, and they basically just jolt you with huge amounts of electricity, which eventually I believe stops your heart. But it's
so bizarre.
It's a rough way to go.
Yeah.
And Ted, they said when he walked in, was just like a ghost, and that he was
very afraid of it.
He was very scared to die.
Well, you know what, bitch? It's your fucking time. I don't know. I know people disagree on the death penalty and believe people should. You never want to take a life, but whatever. I feel like someone like Ted Bundy fucking deserves it. Honestly, I wish we could do something worse to him.
Yeah.
Think of all the pain he dealt onto so many people at the end of their lives. He's honestly lucky he only got a little jolt of electricity and was done.
Yeah, was dead in a few minutes probably.
Yeah, well fucking deserved. And what a bitch. He was trying to get out of it, and he kept saying oh, they're not going to get me. They're not going to be able to do it. They won't. I'll kill myself before they can do it. But then, you can't hide forever, can't run forever. And he was just completely delusional.
Yeah, I mean, no normal human wants to watch another human die, but one of the, I think it was a prosecutor in his case who went to his execution, actually had really interesting things about say about the death penalty. Like, obviously, not in every case does someone deserve the death penalty, but depending on the
serial killers
enormity of your crimes, like if you're a serial killer, you're killing mass numbers of people. Like all those people lost their life. Especially torturing people. Like I just can't fuck with that. If you ever do that to someone, I just like I can't respect your life enough. If you had no respect for someone else's, and literally treating them like objects, like sex objects, and then
discarding them like a used condom,
tearing
pretty
them
much.
Apart.
Disgusting. It's horrible.
It's really gruesome. And
he deserved it.
Evil what he
Fucking
did.
Burn in hell. I don't believe in hell, but still burn wherever the fuck he went.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad he got executed and rightfully so. I mean, he doesn't deserve to live anymore. And who knows? Like, what if he escaped again or something? Like, fuck.
Yeah.
They should have locked his ass down as soon as they caught him the first time.
Yeah.
And the fact that he got out
again.
Yeah, and he escaped custody in Colorado and then killed more people.
Yep.
Imagine how you'd feel if you were the jailer that just wasn't paying attention when Ted Bundy escaped, and then now all of these other girls are dead because you let him out of custody. Like, you let him escape.
I'm sure their family's so pissed.
It's fucking crazy. But yeah, so if you guys want to check out that documentary, definitely go listen to the Ted Bundy tapes. Very interesting stuff that he provides. It's just interesting to hear him talk, and all of this will make more sense to you if you haven't seen it. And it is very interesting, but beware, it is pretty disturbing. So
yes.
But yeah, I mean, serial killers are fascinating in a weird way. Just to even contemplate people,
just the psychology
have the ability to do it.
Interesting, yeah.
And yeah, I guess we'll never know if there was an actual origin of the serial killer issue. So hopefully you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you did, like, subscribe. But yeah, that will be it for us today. We will see you guys next week. Stay safe out there.
And stay woke.
See you next time, guys.